So, Chris, welcome to King's Chambers. My name is Paul Tucker. I'm head of Chambers and also one of the planners in Chambers. And I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Christopher Katkowski QC, to use your Sunday name, Kit Kat, to use your everyday name, to Chambers. It's an absolute privilege to have you on board. So, how have you found the first few days in King's?
It's been absolutely wonderful, and thank you very much indeed, Paul, for being as crazy as to take me on as a member of King's. Very, very kind of you and your colleagues. Heavens only knows what you've let yourselves in for. But no, it's been really wonderful. I've had a great first few days, and I've been given a very, very warm welcome indeed. And I've been made to feel, very at home in King's. So, thank you very much indeed. It's been a great and very promising start. And, your clerks, now my clerks, are just beginning to get used to me.
Absolutely. They're delighted to have you on board. How's the market reacted?
The market has been interested in my move, and I posted on LinkedIn on the Tuesday afternoon of this week when I made the move to King's. And when I last looked at the post about an hour ago, I was running at about 19,700 and something or other views. So I think, if we get to 20,000, I shall have to put up 20,000.
I think that probably puts you in the realms of being a social influencer, but I know nothing about these things. You may have adverts for cosmetics perhaps coming on your website.
I've had a lot of lovely messages and emails, and I know that you have as well, and Gary and Mark have too. And it's been fascinating, really. Been very interesting indeed, and I'm very grateful to all those very kind people who have written in such a lovely way to me and or to you, Gary and Mark. Thank you.
It's nice to have this format to be able to formally thank people, frankly. King's, as you know, started in Manchester back in the late 1940s, but it's now got offices in Leeds and Birmingham.
Even before my time.
Absolutely. But some might wonder, looking at your move, as to whether you're leaving the delights of the capital and heading north. So what is the cunning plan?
The cunning plan. Well, I've headed north many times over my career, and I actually do a lot of work in the northwest, which is great. And one of my homes from home pre the pandemic was either the Malmaison in Manchester or more recently the Dakota. So I'm no stranger to your lovely city. But what I intend to do, as you know, Paul, and as we are making it known to the public and to the market, is that I will continue to be based in London. We're taking some space. We have taken some space, as you know, at King's Central Court, which is a very nice office building just off Chancery Lane in legal London. I don't know what illegal London is, but we're and I should be based there. And if anyone wants to come and see me at my sort of new home, so to speak, they'll be able to see me there, one of the meeting rooms. Or, as always, very, very happy to go to meet people wherever they want to sit down and meet. This is all in our post-vaccination world, of course, when I emerge from hibernation here in Sussex.
Well, let's hope that comes sooner rather than later. I think the virtual world is starting to become a little more tiresome and less innovative and exciting. So no, but that's not just for you, is it? In terms of the Argyle Club at Central Court, the plan is for other members of King's to have that available to them as well. So it's a home away from home.
A home away from home, yes, that's right. So it should be a very good facility for us all. And I look forward to emerging from my hibernation and sort of setting up shop just off Chancery Lane. And I'll be there, and I'll come up to Manchester. Obviously, as we all know, King's has got offices as well in Birmingham and Leeds. So wherever anyone wants to sit down, and there have been all sorts of suggestions in answer to my LinkedIn post as to where we should sit down and have these meetings. So, hoping and assuming that the world returns to a situation where we do actually sit down around the table and have meetings.
Well, that's an interesting segue, because I'm really interested to know how you've coped with the virtual world. I was told back in March by somebody far more eminent than I would ever be, that we're going to go down into lockdown and go to sleep in 2020 and wake up in 2031 when the world has changed. So how have you found the virtual world? Has it been fun or tiring, or how have you enjoyed it or not?
We've all had to adjust, haven't we? So, I mean, if you'd said to me, a bit over a year ago, this is what the coming year would hold, I mean, I would have thought you were completely crazy.
Yeah.
Whoever would have believed it, really. So we've all had to adjust majorly, haven't we, to very, very different ways of working. And we've got used to it. Personally, from my point of view, I would very much like to get back to having some form of semblance of the way things used to be done, but I suspect that the future is going to hold a mix of the things we've got used to over the last year and how things used to be to some or other extent. But I mean, in terms of the work that we do, as you know, our planning inquiries are now routinely held by video.
Yeah.
Veterans has now very much got on top of running that very efficiently. I think the one thing that I would say in terms of the practicalities is doing our job via video, whether it's doing a planning inquiry, whether it's doing a hearing, whether it's doing a court case, whether it's having meetings with clients, is that, I don't think it is just me, but certainly after a few hours, each day on the video, you do feel a bit sort of as if someone's done something to the inside of it.
Yeah, it certainly gets very, very tiring. I think the absolute Pins have done a fantastic job, but the absolute limit of doing sort of 1.5 hour sessions a day is extraordinary. The difficult thing is then to communicate that you don't then want to sit on the emails and sit and spend an hour and a half doing an advice, but that seems to be what happens.
I've certainly found with the inquiries, I mean, certainly when the idea was originally floated of having, a relatively short session, then a relatively long break in terms of how inquiries used to be, and then another relatively short session, another sort of relatively long break. Yeah. And I just thought, well, surely we won't need to do that. But I must admit, once I started getting underway doing this, I realised that you really, really do have to do it like that. And so I think the 1.5 hour, then a break, 1.5 hour, then a break, etc., is the only way you can really sort of manage it, because it does get, I was going to say too much. It certainly gets quite tiring. So, so I'm sure I'm not the only person who, after a day of doing video hearing sessions or meetings, whatever, feels a bit frazzled by it all. But we've all got used to it. And what I would say is, I mean, thank heavens for all the various platforms that are available. Carry on doing our jobs, because when the pandemic started, I mean, my first thought was, I won't say literally what my first thought involves language that I really shouldn't use on this recording, but my first thought was, what the heavens am I going to do? How's this actually going to work? What on earth is going to happen to the planning world? Is there going to be any work? And all that business. But as we know, I mean, remarkably, the world in which we work is a very robust one, and it almost seems that whatever is thrown at it, it manages to sort of carry on and sort of do extremely well. So there's been plenty of things for all of us to do, and it's been good that we've been able to carry on working.
And famously, during that period of time, you've been involved in the background work on the white paper, and then you've been doing the various talks to lots and lots of public bodies, and it's been fantastic. Thank you for all of the talks to disseminate the information. I think there's a lot of concerns that were assuaged from conversations we've had. Rather than the substance of anything that may move forward, I'm really interested in knowing what your feeling was, having now seen things from both sides of the fence. What's it like looking from the inside outwards rather than normally just receiving these things as a practitioner?
Absolutely fascinating, to be honest. Really, really, what an interesting job sort of landed in my lap, if you like.
Yeah.
I mean, and also, I mean, talking about the pandemic and the use of videos and so on. I mean, the ability to talk to. I mean, I spoke about the white paper and the ideas in the white paper literally to thousands of people through the various talks that I gave, and people inviting me to talk to their firm, talk to their colleagues, whatever it might be. And that would have been pretty difficult, to be honest, in our old world, just as with our planning inquiries and hearings that we do. I mean, I'm sure you found this, many of our colleagues would have found it. I mean, there's a much greater involvement of the public now in our public inquiries. You know,
Absolutely.
The technology has actually put the public into public inquiries in a way in which they very often weren't in the past. So, but coming to the white paper and all the work there, yeah, absolutely fascinating. I mean, it's been brilliant for me, and you know, there's a lot of work going on at the department now, I know, and a lot of very, very interesting ideas being worked on. There's, you know, the proverbial watch this space. I can see that there are some more webinars coming up later this year,
Yes.
and talks, and perhaps another special episode of your wonderful show. And but it's been really, really interesting indeed, because doing the work on the white paper and the ideas in the white paper with the people at the department from various different parts of the department, it gives you a really, really fascinating insight into how these things actually work at the governmental level, and how the department works with the officials there, how they see the world, how they see what we do, the likes of you and me and our clients. I mean, absolutely fascinating. So, I mean, I'm really, really, really pleased to have been involved. And, you know, well, as I say, watch this space for announcements that will come from the department later this year.
Well, I'm guessing it's almost on a macroscopic level, what I've always said, which is that you should work for both sides. You should always work for public sector and private sector, because that way you get to see how both sides operate. And I think it gives you a little bit more insight, but also sympathy as to what the opposite side may be facing. And I've always stressed that. I don't know if you take the same view.
Very much so. I mean, in our sort of work, I mean, I've always wanted to do lots of work for local authorities, local planning authorities, even when I reached that point in my career when there are enough lovely people out there in the development world who wanted to employ me to do cases. I've always wanted to carry on doing a substantial amount of work for local authorities, so that you can see the world from both sides, so to speak, of the equation. And I think it gives you an awful lot of insight if you do that. So you can take your knowledge and skills that you've developed working for the development industry on the one hand, and bring those into the work you do for local authorities, local planning authorities, and the other way around as well.
Agree.
And absolutely, I mean, there's an awful lot of nonsense which is spoken about public officials, whether it's central or local government level, and a lot of these people are working extremely hard, and not getting much by way of thanks for the work that they do. So, I mean, I'm sure that we've all experienced working with some fantastic people at both central and local government levels in the work that we do.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been keeping an eye on the various sweet messages that have been coming through on LinkedIn, etc., of which there are legion. But I think that one of the ones that caught my eye was a LinkedIn message you got from a tax barrister called Philip Ridgway, who said that you taught him at City Poly before you'd started your career at the bar. So I'm sure you told me at some stage in the past, but I'd forgotten that you'd dipped your toe into the heady heights of academia. So if you'd had your time again, would you have gone down that route, or would you have chosen this one?
Well, it's very interesting, actually. No, I'm extremely happy with the choices I've made. I think it's a question of happening, and I've rolled along with them, and it's worked out sort of kind of okay for me. But no, I mean, when I did an undergraduate and a postgraduate degree at Cambridge in law. I've done nothing but law since age 18. So when I finished my two degrees, I mean, very kind of ridiculously, I sort of thought, well, what do I do now? What happens to me now? And I completely lacked any sort of self-confidence, and the thought of, said to me then, having finished my postgrad, you're going to be a barrister, you're going to be a QC. I would have thought you must be joking. So I, thought, well, how can I sort of use the law that I've learned in some way? So I thought about teaching. I always say to people I was a teacher before I became a barrister, because I was a teacher before I became a barrister. I got a job at what was then the City of London Poly. Wonderful head of department, the late Lady Mary Oliver, who was married to Court of Appeal and later House of Lords judge. And she took me under her wing. And I remember that in my second class that I gave, my second seminar class that I gave, She came in to sit at the back to just see how the new boy was getting on, and I was so nervous. I literally had to sit on my hand. I was so nervous. And the time that I had there, I did 5 years teaching, and the time that I had there was so valuable to me because it gave me that confidence to talk to smaller and larger groups of people. And, when you start teaching, certainly in my case, I'm sure others far better than me, but, in your first year, you're one class ahead of the students. By year 2, you're a couple of classes ahead of them. By year 3, you're thinking, hey, I kind of know this stuff now. So in a way, it worked out. It was Lady Mary Oliver. She saw something in me, and she saw something in another chap called Chris Jeans, who's now the leading employment law QC. And we were both teachers there, and she saw something in us, and she said, literally one day she called us both into her office and she said, have you ever thought of becoming barristers? And quite literally, no, I hadn't thought of becoming a barrister. And she encouraged us both to do that. At that stage already had financial commitments, etc. in those days. And when I was my year was the first year when you went to train to be a barrister, when you didn't have to pay for the pleasure, but you weren't actually paid anything to be trained, whereas today, obviously, as we know, we pay our trainees.
Quite right, yeah.
But in my day, it was, I was the first year in which you didn't actually have to pay anything for pleasure, but you certainly didn't get anything for your training. So, I was able to, because she was so kind and so lovely, she allowed me to carry on teaching part-time while I did my bar exams and etc, and did my training, my pupillage, as it used to be called in those days, until it came to the point where I was taken on, and so I gave up my teaching and became a barrister. But I'm so grateful for the time that I had, and teaching gave me so much. Do I regret becoming a barrister and a QC, etc? No, I don't. Yeah. Do I regret those 5 years I spent teaching? No, I don't. I'm so glad that I did, because it really, really, really helped me massively.
Well, it resonates with my first couple of days in Chambers when I came to Chambers, because Andrew Gilbar introduced me to Stephen Sylvain and told me that Stephen Sylvain had been a lecturer at Manchester, introduced me to John Hoggett, who was a lecturer at Manchester University. I met John Hoggett's wife, Lady Hale, as she became, who was a lecturer at Manchester University. Met Alan Evans, who was a lecturer at Manchester University. Leslie Anderson. It's like half of Chambers had a proper academic career before they come to the bar. I felt very inadequate when I started in Chambers, and it's never really stopped since.
It's obviously the right place for me then.
You fit in perfectly. It's almost like you planned it. And so Chris, finally, and I'm not sure if I can even dare ask you this question, and it's a question that I'm sure you've been asked almost every week for the last 30 years of your professional career. So what's the story behind the most famous nickname at the planning bar?
No, I still love it, by the way. There's still quite a few people who don't realise I actually know what my nickname is. So you still know that you're called Kit Kat, really. My nickname has been so good to me, so good for me, really. It's been wonderful. So the story is a very straightforward one. When I started in my first Chambers, which was buildings in Temple in London, one of the lovely clerks there, wonderful clerk called Jay, who was such a fantastic influence and helped me in the earlier part, well, for most of my career. And I walked into Chambers on my first day, this very young, as I then was, young chap, wondering what on earth all this, being a barrister was all about. And as I walked into the clerk's room on the ground floor, number 2 paper buildings, Jay got up from his desk and walked over to me and gave me the centre of a Kit Kat wrapper that he'd cut out. He'd mounted it on a piece of cardboard. He'd put a safety pin on the back of the piece of cardboard and gave me, it was a badge. He gave me this badge, Kit Kat, and he gave me this badge and said, "You're called Kit Kat because we can't pronounce your surname." So he dubbed me Kit Kat on my first few minutes in Chambers as a barrister, and it stuck. I wore this badge. I can't remember now whether I wore it. I certainly wore it for all of that day. I think I might have worn it for the first week.
I so hope you still got it somewhere.
Yeah, that's a very good question. Actually, I've got a whole box of sort of bits and bobs of mementos and things I've collected over these many years doing this job. And I think the badge must be in the box along with all sorts of.
Well, I completely sympathise. My first six pupil master, as we called him then, was Nicholas Braslavsky QC. So after I'd been introduced, I must have spent a good couple of hours making sure I knew exactly how to pronounce his surname. So it's a delight to have you on board, Chris. It really is. I'm very pleased, very proud. So on behalf of Kings, wherever we are in the country, thank you for coming, and it's a delight to have you as a member.
Right, to be with you. Thank you very much indeed. Thanks, Paul, for this conversation.
It's a great pleasure, Chris. Thank you.